nos teus lábios. Esse passado de memória a chorar nas cordas de um violão. Somos o amanhã nos teus olhos, fundo da razão da nossa luta. Somos a força, inteligência e a vida. No oceano, na fábrica e no campo. Somos o som, a poesia e a luz da nossa caminhada pelo mundo fora. Antes de tudo, somos também a morna, arquivo e mestre da nossa identidade. Um povo modesto, vivendo de lembranças, gigante no amor e na simplicidade. Somos a força, inteligência e a vida. No oceano, na fábrica e no campo. Somos o som, a poesia e a luz na nossa caminhada pelo mundo fora. Antes de tudo, somos também a morna, arquivo e mestre da nossa identidade.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is just a little after 2100 hours. A very good evening to you. A warm welcome, the Monday edition of Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African perspective. We bring you 60 minutes of the very latest news from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. One planet, countless stories as we bring you the voices, the perspectives and the stories that matter. Welcome to it. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. We'll take you through our top stories now.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And we start in the DRC, where the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels have shared a draft agreement aimed at ending the conflict in that country's eastern region. SABC's correspondent Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The M23 rebel group is largely composed of ethnic Tutsis who say they are fighting to protect their community from Hutu militias who fled to the DRC after carrying out the 1994 Rwandan genocide that targeted Tutsis. The DRC government and UN experts say Rwanda has been backing the troops, an accusation Kigali has denied. The DRC government and UN experts say Rwanda has been backing the rebels, an accusation Kigali has denied.
And President of Botswana, Duma Boko, says there is an urgent need for African countries to trade more with each other in order to avoid serious economic hits when especially foreign powers introduce new policies. Boko was speaking at the Southern African Development Community Heads of State and Government Summit held in Madagascar over the weekend.
We've seen when the rough winds of circumstance demonstrated to us the challenge that faces multilateralism in today's world. We've seen how over-reliance on trade with certain powers of the world has rendered us so fatally vulnerable that we are now dependent on their mood swings. They determine what happens on the African continent. And this is because we've allowed ourselves to fall into a trap of self-loathing, where we've hated not just ourselves but our neighbors on the African continent. We've refused, we've been reluctant to trade with each other, to see and recognize each other's worth. We've come to that point, that inflection point in our history, when we must recognize that we need each other.
And finally, hundreds of youth leaders from various G20 countries have convened in the South African city of Ekurhuleni to discuss an array of global issues that has commenced the meeting. That is, some of the delegates have highlighted the importance of artificial intelligence training if Africa is going to compete with the rest of the world.
Our expectation are high expectation to see how the works are going and to see the final communique and how all these countries can get common communique, can get consensus about the measures that they are defending.
For us, it's really important to be here in South Africa because Brazil last year received the Youth 20 and now we are part of the Troika. So this is a really important moment for us to build this together and important for the youth of G20. So we are here to work, to have a consensus and a good dialogue.
One of my main expectations out of the Y20, especially the focus on AI, is to discuss about how to bridge the digital gap and how to implement education using the AI. And overall, I'm really excited to hear voices from around G20 countries, especially since it's so symbolic that it's hosted here this year. I'm really excited to see how the themes of solidarity would emerge in the negotiation process.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And that brings the time to 5 minutes past 9. Just a reminder that you can reach out to us on the socials, share your perspective from wherever you are. Let us know what is happening in and around your world. What are the conversations that are shaping your world, the decisions that you are making in your community. So let's look back at that Southern African Development Community Forum where leaders gathered. They stressed that they want to enhance trade, regional connectivity and economic integration. They held their summit in Madagascar and Antananarivo amid pressing global challenges. Madagascar's President André Rajoelina has taken over as a SADC chair, while Malawian President Lazarus Chakwera has been elected as chair of the Organ on Politics, Defense and Security Corporation. Let's hear more now from SABC's Ditaba Tsotetsi.
A momentous summit as Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has handed over SADC chairpersonship to his Madagascar counterpart André Rajoelina. Rajoelina has received overwhelming support from his peers in the region, such as President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Your assumption of this esteemed role at the 45th SADC Summit here in Madagascar truly marks a historic milestone for Madagascar and reflects the trust as well as the confidence placed in your leadership by your fellow heads of state. As the chairman or chairperson, your vision for accelerating industrialization, transforming agriculture and promoting inclusive energy transition resonates deeply with the aspirations of our region.
The regional bloc is also not spared from global headwinds caused by the Trump administration's trade policy, where a number of countries have been slapped with sweeping tariffs. Botswana President Duma Boko says that this is an opportunity for African countries to increase trade among themselves.
We've seen when the rough winds of circumstance demonstrated to us the challenge that faces multilateralism in today's world. We've seen how over-reliance on trade with certain powers of the world has rendered us so fatally vulnerable that we are now dependent on their mood swings. They determine what happens on the African continent. And this is because we've allowed ourselves to fall into a trap of self-loathing, where we've hated not just ourselves but our neighbors on the African continent. We've refused, we've been reluctant to trade with each other, to see and recognize each other's worth. We've come to that point, that inflection point in our history, when we must recognize that we need each other.
The current situation in the Eastern DRC also featured as SADC wants to see stability prevailing in the restive parts of Congo. SADC Executive Secretary Elias Mahosi says the region will continue to support peace initiatives.
Summit reaffirmed its unwavering commitment to promoting peace, security and stability in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and welcomed the joint mediation efforts undertaken by the African Union Commission, SADC and the East African Community, and the process integrating the Luanda and Nairobi processes, while acknowledging the urgent need for complementarity and harmonization between Africa-led processes with other initiatives, including the Washington Accord 2025 and the Doha Declaration of Principles of 2025.
Mahosi says that the SADC leaders have further lamented the dire situation in Gaza as Israel continues to bombard the enclave.
Summit expressed concern over the ongoing attacks on civilians in Palestine, Gaza in particular, which has resulted in the loss of lives, destruction of property, and worsening humanitarian conditions, and called for an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and the commencement of talks to bring a lasting solution to the conflict.
South Africa will succeed Madagascar as chair of SADC in 2020 to 2027. I'm Dita Botsotetsi, SABC News.
At 11 minutes past 9, let's continue now with some of our top stories. We've been speaking about leaders of the Southern African Development Community meeting in Madagascar over the weekend. So they've stressed that they want to enhance trade, regional connectivity and economic integration. They held their summit in Antananarivo amid pressing global challenges. Madagascar's President Andry Rajoelina has been the newly appointed SADC chair, and now Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera has been elected as chair of the organ on Politics, Defense and Security Cooperation for the bloc. The SABC's Ditaba Ditsotetsi reports.
Stella Longwe pamalonje
palitusokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusati kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwinobwino wambiri chiliyonse chikuteka ndithu bwinobwino.
Ayi azoleka yonse chikuteka mofa magrasi anu apa akuti kumenya yonse azoleka zole azikuteka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
Okay, so let's reflect now on the SADC meeting of leaders in Antananarivo, where the call was made by Botswana's President Duma Noke on greater regional integration, particularly between SADC. We're joined now by President of the Economics Associations of Malawi, Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. Chikadza, you with us?
Good evening. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so what...
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, ma'am. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's just first
Thank
start
you.
with the call that's made by SADC leaders. It's obviously on the back of similar calls that have been made over the past couple of weeks, months, especially against this backdrop of growing economic trade tensions geopolitically, and with, in particular, the United States has changed the playing field. What should they be talking about now beyond this refrain?
Because what has started, especially from the speech by President Duma, is just striking at the heart of Africa's economic vulnerability. Africa has untapped potential. It has huge resources, but it is also at the mercy of the developed countries in such a way that any mood swings tend to affect the economies very high. And we've seen the vulnerabilities now, especially with the tariffs, where countries are actually losing a lot of trade because of these tariffs. And actually, we are seeing that this is resonating with the African Continental Free Trade Area, where I think we are talking about deepening trade between African countries. But apart from just talking, I think countries should now be looking forward, moving above the talks and start implementing, because we've been in these comfort zones for a long time, but now we need to implement. We need to have the infrastructure that should actually connect the countries. We need to have better roads, a rail that can move goods and trade from one country to another. We need even to boost the connections when we're talking about maybe moving goods. Apart from just moving goods, we are talking about e-commerce, e-trade. We need things like those. So the infrastructure is quite important, because minus that, we might just be talking about Africa trading with each other, but it will not happen. African countries, we tend not to trade with each other because we even create these problems ourselves. We restrict trade from other countries. Probably it's high time now we started to look at harmonizing standards. What is it that maybe Malawi can push to South Africa with ease? What is it that South Africa can push maybe to other countries, to Kenya, to Tanzania, to any other country with ease? These are the things I think that we need, because it seems like we tend to create barriers to trade ourselves, and as such, we end up exporting outside Africa, but we have a very huge potential.
Can we look at some of those areas of concern where we are creating barriers to better and greater regional integrative trade between SADC countries in particular?
Yes, for example, apart from tariffs, trade can be restricted with sanitary and phytosanitary conditions. These are restrictions that probably might come just because you are saying there are certain standards that a country has put that if maybe a good is entering into this country, we need them to meet these standards. Sometimes those standards are just to restrict the inflow of trade from other countries. But if we're talking about trade, we want to grow Africa, we want to trade amongst each other, then I think it's high time we start aligning the product standards. We should ensure mutual recognition of certificates from one country to another to ease movement of goods. We should simplify custom procedures. I remember there was a time when we were complaining about roadblocks in Malawi for goods to move from just Zambia to come into Malawi. You see a lot of roadblocks, a lot of checking in of these goods and trucks, and so that delays even trade. If we want to trade, then I think it's high time we remove even corruption from the roads, from the exports that we are trying to move. So it's high time, I think we need even to understand that labor can also move, services can move. And if we are to move that, then we have to facilitate that movement, bringing in the necessary procedures, the necessary facilities, the necessary infrastructure. We need to invest heavily, to connect each other so that at least we can move the goods. But also we should build regional value chains. There can be another country that has maybe comparative advantage in something. We need to specialize by comparative advantage. It's not like any other country can produce everything and just exporting to maybe the rest of Africa. So by doing that, we can see that countries can focus on what they do best. And then they trade that with others. Some can trade in inputs, some in outputs, but at least there will be trade and everybody can benefit. There will be win-win. But also support industrial clusters. Africa has a lot of potential. We have a lot of SMEs, a lot of goods, but we need products from that. We need SMEs to have manufacturers, within, close by, so that at least we can export across borders. And so we also need to promote agro-processing and also light manufacturing. If you see Africa always export unprocessed goods to these developed countries. But we need this to be happening in Africa. We need to create jobs and stop exporting jobs. So by actually bringing in and also promoting agro-processing and light manufacturing, then I think Africa will be on the right track. And yes, we can be trading with each other. We can process within Africa and move goods across borders. And yes, create a win-win solution for each and every country in Africa.
Then let me just hop on to that thinking of a win-win solution. So critics often say that larger trade agreements mean that it could benefit the stronger economies at the expense of the smaller or less industrialized nations. And looking at SADC, you obviously have inequalities there. How do we strengthen intra-SADC trade with a vision of wider intra-Africa trade without widening those inequalities? What should we be looking out for?
That's where I think we were talking about even agro-processing. If you look at Malawi, we produce tobacco, we produce, tea, we produce maybe sugar and so on, but we don't have a lot of manufacturing. And so I think if we want to benefit into these from these intra-Africa trade, we have also to up our games. We need to be at least at the same level, but then we need heavy investment. That's where now I think we are talking about reforming the global financial architecture, because for countries like Malawi to invest, to match maybe with South Africa, we need heavy investment, but we also need access to finance for that. So it's a high time that, those countries which are less privileged should also have access to finance to build their countries, to build their infrastructure, to build even their industries. And so in that way, then they should also be able to process within the countries and trade. But if we just open up and say we can actually benefit from intra-continental trade, then I think with that it will not benefit. And yes, it can widen inequalities between countries, because countries like Malawi, which are always importing from maybe South Africa and other countries, they will keep on importing, and at the end of the day they will not match the development of the other. So we need to help each other. If we are trying to bring one Africa and we want to grow together, then we should hold hands, try to help the others so that they should not be left behind. And I think that's the whole reason about, African Continental Free Trade Area. We need to trade but also grow together. Thank you.
I want to look at how we can do it from government to government, but from people to people. If we're talking about improving the heterogeneity of cross-continental goods and services, that means there's a certain reliance on communities within the various countries, but communities through sectors across the continent that already have existing networks?
Yes, actually, there is a reliance because if you look at, for example, Malawi and South Africa, you can see that we rely on each other. If we just talk about labor, for example, labor from Malawi, which is transported to South Africa, tend to be a bit cheaper. And that is something that is relying on South Africa, but also we see remittances coming into Malawi. And if we were to allow free movement of labor, when we move, we say sometimes somewhere we might see improvement in the economy of Malawi, because by exporting labor which is not actually being in use in Malawi, but it is in use in South Africa, then I think Malawi will be benefiting by reducing unemployment. However, when we also look at sectors, it's the same thing, because even though we have different countries and there is indeed heterogeneity, but countries can benefit with each other, from each other, by at least starting from within. If we are looking at Malawi and we want to develop, the SMEs within Malawi will grow, will actually manufacture, will actually sell even from the within the domestic market, and the surplus can actually go now outside Malawi across the borders and actually earn something for the country, whether in terms of forex, in terms of revenue, and so on. The same can happen to Africa. However, by moving goods freely, by moving goods across borders, these heterogeneities might actually go on disappearing slowly by slowly, because at the end of the day, we might see that the same things that are moving, we are benefiting from each other. And I think those who are lacking in South Africa might be getting something in Malawi. That's why initially I was talking about comparative advantage. Those who can produce something cheaply, I think those should be allowed to produce. If there is another one which can also produce something cheaply, they should be allowed to produce that thing, and not that one country should actually demonstrate that they can produce everything, because it will not be cheap for them, depending on how countries are built.
The regional blocks, that of SADC, COMESA, EACA, some have pointed at them as being a barrier, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And what was envisioned in 2015 when the tripartite free trade area agreement was drawn up? And it's obviously nearly a decade later. Do you believe that we're still on track to deliver on that promise? And the developments that have occurred, have they impeded or improved that vision?
So we will say somehow they impede, but also they sometimes facilitate trade. I'll say this in two ways, because there are some benefits that countries have actually seen by just being in these regional blocks. However, those who are not in the blocks tend to be treated otherwise when we're talking about tariffs, when we're talking about maybe there's the issue for most favored nations. There are some protocols that, when you are in a certain regional or trade bloc, you tend to enjoy certain benefits, and then you agree to treat those who are outside your bloc the same way. Now, sometimes it happens that those of you who are in the bloc do not actually produce something that all of you can benefit, but those who can produce that thing that all of you can benefit are outside the bloc. But because there is this agreement that within the bloc we will treat each other as brothers, but then outside the bloc, anyone who is trading with us, we will treat them as this. We end up seeing that some countries tend not to benefit. Maybe they would have imported cheaply from other countries which are not within the bloc, but just because they are already in the bloc and they are committed to whatever agreements they signed to, that actually prohibits them to enjoy the benefits of maybe importing cheaply outside their bloc. However, if you look at maybe trade per se. I will talk mostly about Malawi and South Africa. Malawi trades a lot with South Africa. And we've seen, even when we're talking about labor movements, Malawians go to South Africa without a visa. I think they get a visa upon arrival, a month. They can stay there on visitor's visa. However, that cannot happen maybe with other countries. There are so many benefits that countries within SADC tend to enjoy. When you're talking about even education, there are certain benefits that students within SADC cannot actually pay, certain fees, certain charges. However, others outside SADC tend to pay certain fees. So there are those benefits that I could say countries tend to benefit, but also when you look at certain trade issues, they tend to be a problem because of these the blocks.
Just
Thank you.
A final question briefly. Is there complementarity? And when I spoke about the various agreements that are in place, and you spoke about the challenges in terms of structural and political hurdles earlier on, does the TFTA blend well into the AFCFTA framework, given that that is already in place?
TFTA, could you please clarify TFTA?
The Tripartite Free Trade Area and the AFCFTA framework. Is there complementarity?
I would say they are complementary because it's kind of tapping from the potential of the tripartite free trade area, and it also blend into COMESA, into SADC, into East African Community, and also covers 29 African countries. So yes, it blends very well. I would say that.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking to us, and much appreciated. That is President of the Economics Association of Malawi, Dr. Bertha Bangara Chikadza. Brings the time to exactly 30 minutes past 9. So we continue with Africa World Hour, and just a reminder, you can listen to us live on the DSTV audio channel 802, and we are available on TikTok, YouTube, and of course including Instagram. That's where you'll find it. At Channel Africa 1 is where you'll find us. Now let's go to news from Central Africa. The government of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels have shared a draft agreement aimed at ending the conflict in the eastern DRC. Officials in Qatar, who are mediating talks between the warring parties, made the announcement that comes a week after renewed fighting broke out in South Kivu province. SABC correspondent Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The draft agreement to end fighting between the DRC government and the M23 rebels is part of the Qatar-led peace process. A Qatari official says the two sides have agreed to resolve their dispute through dialogue. The revelation comes a week after fighting broke out in the eastern province of South Kivu, forcing hundreds of civilians to flee their homes. Both the M23 rebels and the DRC army have accused each other of starting the fighting, which violated a permanent ceasefire they signed in Doha last month. Under the Declaration of Principles that was signed, both parties committed to come up with a comprehensive peace agreement by August 18th, but the recent fighting has delayed that. The M23 rebel group is largely composed of ethnic Tutsis who say they are fighting to protect their community from Hutu militias who fled to the DRC after carrying out the 1994 Rwandan genocide that targeted Tutsis. The DRC government and UN experts say Rwanda has been backing the troops, an accusation Kigali has denied. The DRC government and UN experts say Rwanda has been backing the rebels, an accusation Kigali has denied. Authorities in Qatar are expected to host another round of negotiations soon to facilitate the peace agreement. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
Right, and let's continue with some of what we're looking at here on Africa World Hour. We look at this, the Global Africa Business Initiative. It's gearing up for the 4th edition of its flagship event, Unstoppable Africa, taking place on the 21st and 22nd of September at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in New York. The forum, which has become the leading African business gathering outside of the continent, will bring together global leaders, investors, and innovators under the theme The Big Push. Africa Shapes the Markets. To speak about this year's event, what it means for Africa's economic transformation, we're joined now by Tolu Louis Tamuka, Chief of Government Relations and Africa at the UN Global Compact. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Let's perhaps start with the theme for this year's meeting. And I spoke about the array of people who are going to take part in the conference, but how are they chosen? How is there an effort to make sure that there is maximum value add in every individual that is there?
Thank you. That's a very important question because this year we're convening for the fourth time the Unstoppable Africa Global Engagement event at the Marriott McKee in Times Square over 2 days. And at this convening, it's important that we're able to showcase Africa's finest in the business and private sector industry. Global Africa Business Initiative will convene under the theme that you mentioned already, the Big Push. And this is the time for Africa to shape the markets. And so a big part of our conversation this year will be about trade, especially given the current geopolitical trends and how Africa is poised to take advantage and really engage in the opportunity to trade given the new current headwinds globally. So that's our big theme. And we will continue to engage around the key themes that Gabi convenes around, which is conversations around trade, energy, also having that space to showcase some of Africa's finest in the creative industry, sports, music, fashion, but also look at how we've advanced in achieving the 2063 agenda and in driving the AFCFTA forward, which is also very much a priority for the UN, also in achieving the SDGs.
Just how significant is it for both the UN Secretary General and the AU Chairperson to be co-hosting this edition?
It's a very important opportunity for the Africa Chairperson. As you know, there's a new leadership at the helm of affairs in the Africa Union. And also, the SG has prioritized Africa within his global initiatives for the UN. And so the opportunity to once again meet on the back of UN at 80 is a significant opportunity to once again show that Africa really is a priority of the United Nations. And really having private sector through the UN's role in engaging multilateral stakeholders and private sector and business being one critical partner, really showcases that the opportunity now in 2025 is beyond development, it's beyond only aid, it's about driving investments and driving opportunities for the continent to really drive the markets, hence our theme this year.
And, you know, when we speak about value add, one of the things that just my thinking personally, that often we take a moralistic stand as Africa, even though there are problems within the global trade system. And that is to always say to other countries, rich countries, that, you know, you really need to rebalance the subsidies that you know, for instance, farmers get of the countries that are supposed to be at least helping us into their markets. But it's good to see that we are now looking at what we can do in terms of moving raw minerals like lithium and cobalt and refining and manufacturing them locally, even if it's not in our own countries, but we are driving the national agenda for Africa.
Very important points you've emphasized there. It's about what can Africa do for Africa this time around. And Africa, as we know, represents 3 trillion in terms of its market and also presents a significant business, trade, and investment opportunity for the world. Hence, you know, the G in our name, global, also means, you know, how does Africa situate itself within that global space to take advantage of opportunities to trade with the rest of the world. I think we know full well that the rest of the world has, you know, traded with Africa. But this time we're looking at how Africa benefits from such opportunities, trade, innovation, and also looking at how the creatives can drive economic progress for the continent. And in terms of one of the issues you mentioned, the opportunities around critical minerals, these are the conversations and the solutions we will be finding for during our convening this year. We'll have, global stakeholders, African experts in this industry, really showcase the opportunities to drive Africa's growth in this important sector forward for the continent, and also particularly for the young people on the continent, with new opportunities for employment, for skills, and also to help move the growth of the continent forward.
And what do you say to young people who will be attending the conference, young people who are watching, who themselves are contributing to the discussions you're having when you're looking at the digital and energy sovereignty issue? I know that's something that you're going to be looking at, because the reality is we are at a quagmire where we looking at the investment versus aid paradigm, how to navigate those shores while coming out of it on top, where we ensure that it's Africa that is transformed, it's our economy that's growing, and we're retaining those benefits domestically.
Exactly. I mean, I would say to young people, you're welcome to Unstoppable Africa 2025. You're welcome either to join us in person if you're working as an entrepreneur, a unicorn, an incubator. We really want to hear from the voices of young people at our global stage. And for those who cannot be with us in person, we welcome them virtually. We will have the opportunity for folks around the world to connect to us virtually. We'll be live streaming 2 days of convening, because the voice of the young people on the continent are really key. We know what they represent in terms of the opportunities for growth on the continent, and ensuring that they are part of the solutions to many of these critical issues, as you mentioned, tech, AI, opportunities not only for the continent but for the world. And young people from the continent can play a leading role across the world in this nascent but very important area. And we don't want them to be left behind, but really be at the helm of creating new solutions for the new challenges and opportunities that the world will present. So it is a space for young people, and we're happy to have them with us. We'll have young folks who will speak and be part of our speaker group in Unstoppable Africa. And so it's really an opportunity for young folks to really engage with some of the key players across Africa and the world through Unstoppable Africa.
And I mean, it's back to our formative issue around growth amidst these geopolitical headwinds. But developing complex value chains that will ensure or translate into trade liberalization and value-added manufacturing and integration for Africa. What will it take? Because it will take a lot more than all of you sitting there at the table coming up with solutions, but building platforms that are resilient to the task.
Right. No, indeed. And we know that 4% of the annual GDP of Africa's growth is on track to outpace the global average, which currently stands at 2.7%. So this is a huge opportunity for the continent to move forward in terms of its growth trajectory. And so at our convenience at Unstoppable Africa, we'll be having some deep dive conversations into many of these critical issues, looking at opportunities for growth in the digital sector. Definitely, that's going to be a game changer for the continent, but also looking at energy. This year, we're going to be showcasing a very important innovation that is happening across Africa. It's called the Mission 300. It's about electrifying, providing electrical connections for 300 million Africans across the continent. And this is backed by key governments as well as key stakeholders who want to see this transformation, which will unlock opportunities for employment, for jobs, for entrepreneurship, for innovation on the continent. So I believe if we get at least two of these opportunities right, we then unlock this economic trajectory for the continent, being that, there's so many countries really poised to outgrow their pace in terms of economic growth on the continent, and backed with the right skills and the right stakeholders to help fast track this innovation, we will see a lot of progress. And that's what we want to do. We want to provide a convenient space to help catalyze and make connections to advance these critical issues on the continent.
Some observers have said we really need to underscore and refine the role of development banks on the continent to ensure agency and not dependency. We obviously don't want to dwell on the challenges, but what do you see as the low-hanging fruit?
Right. No, that's an important point, because we will have many of these development bank players on our stage, the likes of Afrexim Bank. They've made critical inroads into, driving investment opportunities, not only on the continent, but also bringing in the Caribbeans into the mix, looking at, trade across and beyond even our borders. And we want to tell the story despite the challenges around risks that business is happening on the continent, big business, and there is opportunity to even go into larger scale with support of these development banks who can back up, these innovative ideas that the private sector businesses have on the continent. And so we're bringing these key stakeholders together to see what is happening at scale on the continent, and for countries to learn from each other, really ensure that they can also bring to bear opportunities for their own citizens to really advance in terms of growth on their own soils. And so bringing the development sector, the private sector, the banks into our spaces, and really looking at ways to unlock these opportunities, we will be able to ensure that we're able to go an extra mile in ensuring that we truly unlock scalable innovations and really address some of the perceived risks out there and that could hinder progress, but showing that, businesses on the ground are making change happen, are using the innovative tools to further and advance. And also these development banks can also learn one or two things from how the businesses are able to thrive and really bring their own resources to complement the effort of private sector on the ground.
Just a final one, and I know I'm supposed to end the interview now, but there's one I'm intrigued by and excited to hear about: sports economies. What is going to be on the table in adding this to the matrix?
Right. We've always had sports economy as one of our key areas within our work around showcasing the creative sector, because that's a huge opportunity for growth on the continent. And we will also showcase that again this year. We're going to be joined by sports icons who will be on our stages. Some of the sports icons who are globalists around the world. We have the likes of Louis Deng, the famous basketballer, not only for his fame on the global courts, but also giving back to the continent in terms of business opportunities, but also providing opportunities for young people to dream of also getting to similar levels in terms of basketball and other sports opportunities that could also help unlock growth in terms of the sports economy. So we'll be having these key players, the likes of Azizat Oshola, who is a leading footballer, female footballer, but also ensuring that she's able to innovate also in her home country in Nigeria and open doors for young girls to see this field as an opportunity for economic growth, for employment for themselves too. So we'll be having these voices on our stage this year.
Tolu, thank you so much for speaking to us. Much appreciated. All the best for the event. Hope we are able to check in with you again about what's going on there and the outcomes. Tolu Lewis Tsamuka, Chief of Government Relations and Africa at the UN Global Compact, just speaking to us about Unstoppable Africa.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África.
Okay.
Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And wrapping up Africa World Hour today with an anniversary, the globe marking World Breast Cancer Research Day. It's one of South Africa's women's top issues of discussion and priorities, as one South African woman says she owes her life to early detection. Sheldine Lulu Masondo was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in 2016, and following years of chemotherapy and radiation, she has emerged as one of the voices sounding the call for African women to get regular cancer screenings. She now joins us via Zoom from her home in Johannesburg. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the warm welcome.
Thank you, Mama Son. So let's speak about what is triple negative breast cancer to begin with.
A triple negative breast cancer is a type of cancer that does not have three common receptors. And those receptors are like your estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and a HER2 receptor, I think. And I think in simple terms, it means that it's a type of cancer that can be more aggressive and may grow or spread faster than any other breast cancers.
So when you heard this, obviously that would have been the first time you heard of such.
Yes, it was the first time. I knew there was.
And how did you receive the news? Because it's often confusing, particularly when people are speaking medically, clinically speaking, about something that affects your body and it's probably going to affect you for a lifetime if, as you said, you survive it.
A cancer diagnosis, I was very scared. I was angry. I was confused. I thought I'm dying tomorrow. And obviously it's due to lack of knowledge of what I was faced with. What is this cancer? So I was very scared. I must say.
How old were you, and did you have any support when you got the diagnosis?
I was 37 years old at that time. My husband and family, they were very much supportive. We had to learn what cancer is. I thought cancer was a white man's disease, was for older people. So to my surprise, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was not white. I was not old at that time. So yeah, I really, the support I got was my husband, my children who were small then, my sisters, like my entire family. They were there for me, and they were also eager to learn, to start walking the journey with me, to say, let's learn about what we are faced, the journey we're about to embark on.
And the beauty of the health activism that you're doing now, and you obviously did then through your condition, whether wittingly or not, is that, as I say, each one teach one, because by going on the journey with you, people around you, loved ones, and even people who don't know, then start learning. So were you doing regular tests, or Was this also another wake-up call and a teachable moment for you that it is important to do these regular tests?
Sure. I would say thank you to my daughter, who was 5 then. We were cleaning, and by mistake, she fell on top of me on my right breast, and immediately it swelled up. And that was, I don't like going to the doctors, but I had that eagerness to say, let me go check what this is.
Because it's not
And
normal.
yeah, it's not normal for a breast to grow that big. I was healthy. I was healthy before the diagnosis. And when it swelled up, immediately I just went to get checked on. And a scan was done, a mammogram was done. And, the first doctor who did the scan said, no, it does not look like cancer. But if there's something, you have, at the back of your mind to say, let me go for a second opinion. Why is this swell not going down? They did another test, and only to find out it was stage 2B of a triple negative breast cancer.
You have said such an important thing, because I'm sorry, I had a train of thought, but I'm going to catch up with it now. Yes, okay, there it is. That you were healthy, and often when one is doing all the right things, you think you are immune to diseases. So is it something, or illnesses, is it something that was already in your body? Did it have anything to do with anything that you were doing or not doing, according to what the doctors told you when you got the second opinion? Actually, my question was about the second opinion. Did you know that you could get a second opinion? Because many women don't even know that a second opinion exists.
I did not know. Truly, so I did not know. The reason why actually I went to another doctor was because, the procedures with the medical aids, I think what they requested then was for me to pay the 6,000 before they can do a biopsy, which I did not have. And, I thought, no, man, I don't have. They said it does not look like cancer. So why must I pay this 6,000 when I can go to a public hospital where they can check and just to, to confirm it's not cancer? I really thought it's not cancer. And to my surprise, it was indeed cancer.
So you then had to go through a mastectomy, the removal of one of your breasts. Was that the end of the story, or did it continue? And how did that feel? You spoke about the psychological effect of just being told that you have an illness that you associated with white people and elderly people. How much more psychological havoc did it wreak on your mind, body, and soul?
It really took a toll on me. As an African woman, cancer is new to me. I just went through the most harsh treatment, and just when I thought, everything is done and I have to go through the removal of my breast, for the longest of time, I hated my body. I hated looking myself in the mirror. My self-esteem just dropped. Actually, it was my husband who helped me re-love myself and appreciate the person I am, the change, to accept the change that I was going through at that moment. And I really had to condition my mind every day to say, you know what, I'm a beautiful woman. Having one breast does not define who I am. I'm still beautiful. I'm still a mom. And I think what also helped me after that was the birth of my son, being able to breastfeed with that one breast also reminded me that I'm still a full woman, still a full woman. I'm still a beautiful woman. But it took time and it took a whole lot of work, not only from me, but my family as well helped me through it to re-love myself.
And very quickly, Mama Sondo, Cancer Vice, tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing.
You just brought a smile to my face.
Well, I'm glad I did.
Can Survive, it's a non-profit organization. It's survivor-driven. It was started by survivors who embarked on a motorbike journey just to go to rural areas, underserved communities to spread awareness about cancer and to spread, early detection. And I was one of those women who was in hospital. I remember I was in hospital, laying there, waiting for my husband to come before surgery, and I was weeping. And I went to Facebook and I saw this group. I'm like, I'm not the only one. There are women out there who have gone through this. And immediately I phoned this number, and the lady who picked up the phone, was on the phone with me until my husband arrived. And my prayer that day was, God, if I can just, win this battle, if I can just, come back from this surgery, I promise you, this is the job I want to do. This is the work I want to do. I want to be the one that goes to our people out there to say, you know what, I'm a Zulu woman. I had cancer. I've got one breast, but I'm still alive. Cancer can be beaten. Know your body. Anything that's foreign on your body, get it checked out. And I think that's how much I love Can Survive, to say we are the survivors that go to people to teach them about cancer. We don't wait for them to come to us. We go to them every year. We choose one province in October where we go for 10 days or 8 to 10 days, where we go and just spread awareness about cancer. We share our journeys. We give hope. We educate them. So that is Can Survive in a nutshell.
Well, thank you.
And I'm the internal, sorry, I forgot to say I'm the internal coordinator for Can Survive.
Okay. No, I'm sure we'll speak to you again about this very important work that you're doing. And congratulations on finding a place in your journey that you can help uplift others. And most importantly, educating us. So we thank you so much for your time. That is Sheldon Lulu Masondo, triple negative breast cancer survivor. And as you heard her say, that she also works with Can Survive. That's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour. Up next is African Diaries with Shayla and Dukumana. From us, it's good night for now.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.